Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we flap through 10 years of tweets filled with millions of hashtags, memes, and Bieber references to pinpoint the past, present, and future impact of a little bird called Twitter. And we're going to do it all in 140 characters or less.
Actually, you're already over the character limit.
Crap.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, the official podcast of Monsters Unlimited, a creative agency with a business brain. I'm Shad Conley, Communications Director at Monsters Unlimited, and I spend my nights tweeting at Katy Perry. And one of these days, she's going to respond.
And I'm hashtag Patrick Jebber, hashtag Creative Director at hashtag Monsters Unlimited.
That's a lot of tags, man. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, our goal on Speaking Human is to simplify complex marketing topics. We toss aside all the buzzwords and mumbo jumbo to focus on how marketing can bring brands and people together. On today's episode, we mark a major social media milestone, the 10th anniversary of Twitter, by talking about how the social staple has changed the world, the current role of the bird in brand marketing, and what the next decade will hold for the Twitterverse. This podcast is getting mocked mercilessly right now by tweets featuring the hashtag SpeakingPoohMan, so let's get into it.
Hey, Justin, what's up?
Not much, Jimmy. Hashtag chillin'. What's up with you?
Just been busy working. Hashtag rise and grind. Hashtag is it Friday yet?
Hey, check it out. I brought you some cookies. Hashtag homemade. Hashtag oatmeal raisin. Hashtag show me the cookie.
Sweet. Hashtag don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. Hashtag getting my cookie on. Hashtag I'm the real cookie monster. Hashtag no.
Delicious, right? Hashtag I did it all for the cookie. Hashtag LOL.
Hashtag classic.
What you just heard was an audio clip from a now famous Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon sketch that went viral way back in 2013. In that sketch, Fallon and his frequent partner in comedic crime, Justin Timberlake, show us what a Twitter conversation might sound like in real life. That video and the existence of the hashtag itself are examples of just how ingrained Twitter has become in our culture. We're going to talk about the influence of Twitter on both the individual and brand levels in just a minute. But first, Patrick, can you give our listeners a quick recap of the rise of Twitter over the past decade?
Yeah, absolutely. What I find so fascinating about Twitter, Shad, is that many people say they don't know what it is, but they know about it.
Good point, yeah.
But, let's face it, lots of people use Twitter. It has 304 million monthly active users and almost 620 million tweets go out per day. And if you want to know what the mass majority of people using Twitter think, it's all up for grabs. There are a plethora of stats on anything and everything Twitter. For example, number of times love shared on Twitter is about 34.8 billion mentions. Just people talking about love.
That's a lot of love.
The most followed person, who you mentioned in our intro, pop star Katy Perry, has nearly 85 million followers. Heck of a lot of followers for one person.
Yep.
The most geotagged city, Sao Paulo, Brazil. And the average number of followers per Twitter user comes out to about 208, which is a pretty decent number. And for a service that started out as a way to broadcast status updates and now serves as a global real-time information network, Twitter has grown into an empire. One, unfortunately, that has never turned a profit. Strange, since every brand worth something uses Twitter. And 77% of marketers listed Twitter as one of the top 3 priority social platforms. But trends and stats, they change so often, but, it's still surprising to see that number attached to some of those things.
Yeah, a lot has happened on Twitter in 10 years. When you talk about social media or the internet, Twitter's almost always a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. No matter what you think of Twitter, like I said, a lot of people, they say they don't know what it is or how to use it or why it's relevant, but there's no changing the fact that it is relevant.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's funny to me, and we'll probably get into this a little more, that those jokes and comments like, what is this tweet? Still exist, 10 years later. Yeah. So jumping right in, let's dive right into our conversation. We got a lot to hit here with Twitter. Let's start with our own personal thoughts and experiences. What are yours with using Twitter?
My personal thoughts about Twitter. Should I keep this to 140 characters?
Or less.
I think I just went over.
Nobody would retweet that.
I'll say that it's a very powerful force. I mean, for something that started off a simple way for people to communicate. So my personal experience with Twitter is that, I have my own personal Twitter feed. I don't use it very often. We use it more for business, but it's definitely something that is very powerful.
Powerful is a good word to go with it. Twitter is probably, to me, it's the most important social media site. And the main reason for that being it connects people by topics as opposed to most of the other social media sites, which connect people based on existing relationships. It's on a bigger scale. If Facebook, say, connects you to your little slice of the world, Twitter connects you to the whole world. Basically, it's like texting on a global scale, right? And like you mentioned, the power of Twitter comes from that scale of it and the reach of it. And it's like ultimate connectivity. It's connecting you with everyone across the world. You want to talk about this one topic? Here's 5,000 other people talking about the same thing that you can get their thoughts and perspectives on.
Yeah, and I was going to say the fact that you have to condense your thoughts and the tweet down to 140 characters. That's probably one of my favorite parts of it. There is something very pure about trying to convey a thought, an emotion, a sense of whatever is happening in that short, condensed message.
Yeah, it's definitely what makes it unique. And one of the cool things I think about it is when you're looking at a larger story, you're seeing these small pieces that give you a whole picture of it. I can remember how I heard about the Boston Marathon bombing was on Twitter. Real-time little fragments from people, and you take in like 5 or 6 of them, and you're like piecing together this overall thing. It actually happened yesterday. I was talking to you at the time. I was scrolling through my Twitter feed, and I was like, oh man, Prince died. Just looking through the stream, and it's coming up tweet after tweet after tweet, taking shape in my mind.
Yeah, getting those news snippets at the same time as everyone else in the world is pretty crazy.
It's social. That's what it's all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talking about Twitter, both from a business and just general social media perspective, where does it fall in your hierarchy of social networks? Is it in your top 3?
It does, or should I say hashtag it does. It is in the top 3. It's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter.
What I'd call the holy trinity of the first decade of social media anyway.
And especially in business, for sure. We sort of couple the LinkedIn and Twitter together because they're the most relevant for businesses. Most businesses, anyway.
I'd agree with that. And like I said, on a personal level, it's probably my favorite network. It's the one I use the most, work and personal, that I'm on the most looking at and where I grab the most valuable information from. Also, like you mentioned, one of the things, I'm a huge fan of limitations in general with things. I think they keep you focused and create an environment where creativity can kind of flourish when you have these little parameters you're defined by. So for me, that's what Twitter does great. As a social consumer, it's so much easier to take in these small snippets than the bigger chunks you get on other sites.
Limiting yourself. It's amazing how something where you would think would be a negative turns out to be a positive.
Yeah, as we know from some of the work we do, that happens a lot. You don't think it's gonna, you think you're being restricted, but it's actually giving you this little landscape where you can use those limitations to your advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm curious to see what happens when they've talked about lengthening the character limit.
Yeah, that's something I really hope they don't do. I feel like you just lose all the Twitterness of Twitter by, saying your post can be as long as they want, or you could put a full blog post up there. It, for me, would kill what the network is.
Changes the whole premise of the channel.
Yeah, that's why it's surprising to me they'd even consider it. That's like eliminating your uniqueness. I mean, then what makes you all that much different from Facebook or LinkedIn or anything else other than audience, I guess. But we're talking about the limitations as an advantage. What's your favorite thing about Twitter? Would that be your favorite thing, or is there something else?
Going back to what you were talking about earlier, the searchability and the immediacy of seeing what's trending, gathering that knowledge. I think the simple fact that you see newsworthy info when everyone else sees it and able to access the same information at the same time or roughly the same time, that's probably the thing that I love most about it.
Yeah, as they're happening. Which
yeah.
pretty amazing, especially when you think about, where we were, say, 20 years ago with stuff like that. You're just kind of waiting from the news, or you're hearing things from people. It could be hours later, days later. And now it's as it's unfolding. My favorite thing about Twitter is a little different. It's the comedy, man. Twitter is by far the funniest social network we have. And because of that character limit, it's basically created for that. It's like made for one-liners and like witty asides and, commenting on things as they're happening. Almost every day I'm on Twitter, I see at least a couple things that make me laugh. People are just really clever and really funny on Twitter.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, but it is ripe for one-liners, isn't it?
It's made for comedy. Someone should do a study on that. What's the funniest social network? I don't know how you'd gauge it, but be interesting to see.
Just compare them side by side.
Sit 3 people in a room, make them read posts, and see how many times they laugh.
Yeah. What do you think has been Twitter's biggest contribution to social media and our culture over the past decade?
It's kind of what you just touched on, which is the real-time news. We're all experiencing an event happening at the same time from different perspectives. I think that's the major thing to it. Like I mentioned before, we're getting these little fragments that create this larger picture when you put it together. And that's something kind of amazing. With these trending topics, you get a mosaic of the story by just reading these little nuggets, little pieces one at a time. I know some of the blog posts I've actually created for the Monsters Unlimited blog, I put the story together using people's tweets. Like I did one on the failure of the marketing for the movie Tomorrowland. That was all just basically different opinions of people on Twitter as this topic was trending. And it's amazing how you get this bigger picture by just taking these little pieces from Twitter and consuming them all at kind of the same time.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate focus group, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I was thinking the same thing. It's this impact that it has had on bringing the world together, and connecting it through these very short updates that, give us a bigger picture. So, yeah, I agree with you completely on that.
I mean, that to me is the main crux of it. The kind of side point that goes along with that, the sidecar, if you will, is hashtags, right? We got hashtags from Twitter. 10 years ago, nobody knew a hashtag was nothing other than a symbol.
It was a pound sign on the telephone.
Yeah, used for, when you call into something and they're like, press pound.
That's why it's funny when you talk to someone who's, sort of older and they see that and they're like, I thought that was a pound symbol. I don't know what are you talking about? Hashtag. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, and you talk to somebody younger and they're like, what is a telephone?
A telephone with buttons? What? With a cord? What?
What do you think is the key strength of Twitter for brands? Like, why should a brand today want to have a Twitter presence?
Well, put simply, it's powerful at amplifying brand messages. Something that starts off to be a brand message can really flourish into something much bigger than what it originally was, simply through retweets and replies and direct links. So that's really the reason why brands should consider it.
Yeah. And, to go along with that, it's the avenue for connecting with people by topic. As opposed to, your Facebook, you're going to connect with people because you know them or based on relationship. With LinkedIn, you're going to connect with them based on what you do or the services you provide. That's the key there. With Twitter, it's, these are the topics we're interested in. These are the topics related to our brand. How can we connect with people who are also interested in those things? So that's how it's uniquely positioned for brands in the social marketing world.
Which is important because this is something that you don't have to worry about who you're already connected to make it effective.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a way to widen your reach. And especially, when it comes to content marketing, you have a blog post or some other content you put together. It's a good way to reach people who might be interested in grabbing that who are outside of your network.
Which who isn't looking to do that from a brand perspective?
Yeah. So the flip side, if that's the strength, what's the weakness or what's the challenge for brands using Twitter today?
The biggest weakness or challenge probably comes from not knowing when to tweet and what to tweet and how often to tweet. Those are probably the biggest. Those, just like all marketing initiatives, those should be carefully planned out and thought through. It's not enough to just publish and hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, based on our conversations, talking with clients and stuff, I think it's pretty overwhelming for someone at a business who's never done it before. It's kind of like, where do I begin with this thing? You know? And then, as you mentioned, those best practices you get into, I'd probably pinpoint the biggest challenge as it's the time involved with Twitter more so than the other networks. You really have to be present there because it goes so fast. You know, we stream through those topics so quickly on Twitter that you have to be posting a lot more and you have to be following people a lot more, you know, looking at what people are doing. You really have to be in that world more so than you do with like a Facebook where you can just glance at it here or there and still take in most of the information you need. It's more of a time and resource commitment, I think.
Yeah, well, like Twitter, I always compare it to a stream of consciousness, especially if something doesn't pick up and go viral, for example. You know, that tweet may have a very, very short lifespan.
Yeah, unless you're like Katy Perry and, you know, every post is seen by millions, most of your tweets are probably going to die alone.
A sad, lonely death.
Yeah, it's just a fact of life. So that's, you know, Twitter in the now. Let's take a look into the Twitter future, right? We're 10 years down here. As you mentioned in the intro, this company has never turned a profit. Over the past year, a lot's been made. There's been a lot written about the plateauing user base. They're not gaining users. They might be losing some users. And the revenue growth from advertising, which is the big thing with social now, has been slowing down. So with all that stuff in mind, what do you think the future looks like for Twitter? Do you think it will survive? I mean, could it possibly die within the next decade? Or what do you think it needs to do, or what will it do to change moving forward here?
This is the one time I think I will probably say that Twitter just needs to keep on doing what it's been doing over the years. It's really about evolving, right? Because every business, as it evolves, changes its relevancy in the market. It's worked for them. You know, they aren't today what they were when they started. Do I think there'll be something totally different in 10 years? Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm actually pretty much on the same page with you. I think there seems to be some sort of internal uncertainty from the stuff I read going on at Twitter right now, where they aren't sure what they are. They're fiddling around with these ideas, you know, longer posts. They've added images and videos over the past years. And it's just like, I don't know that they have a vision for what they're going to be in the future, you know, for what they want Twitter to become, which is problematic.
Yeah.
But for me personally, you know, I kind of agree with you. I think maybe even stepping it back and just being like, this is what Twitter is. You know, it's not longer posts. Our uniqueness is built around doing these things. I think preserving that core to it is important. You know, maybe it is the peak. Maybe they're just going to grow slowly. That happens once you reach a certain saturation point. And is that such a terrible thing? I don't know.
No, I don't think it is. You know, I mean, there's so much pressure on social platforms to just keep growing, to get bigger and to get bigger and to get bigger. I think that pressure is unlike anything that we see in just day-to-day business. I mean, you always want growth, but to the extreme that these companies have grown over the years, there's no comparison. You know what I mean?
And it's been so fast, too. It's been such fast growth over the past decade.
I sort of attribute the way that many of the social platforms have plateaued and slowed in growth to the .com bubble, you know? I mean, inevitably, you can't maintain that level of growth forever. So eventually, you are going to slow down. And that's not a bad thing, like you said. It's just one of those things. It's maturity, I think, in a lot of ways.
But you're right. You know, it's a weird thing with the whole social media world. We've kind of got past that phase one, the experimental, you know, we're not trying to make money. We're going to see what this thing becomes phase two. It's dollars in, it's making a profit. You know, we're in that phase two. And in a way, you know, that wild experimental phase is gone. I will say real quick, you know, just to touch on the fact that they have all these news stories about in 10 years, Twitter's never turned a profit, never made money. The way that is covered is in a slanted sort of way. They're making a lot of money off of advertising. Don't be fooled. But they're also putting a lot of money into the company. To me, the fact that it's always laid down like it makes it sound like Twitter's just like bleeding money when they're not. You know, they're still making millions. They still have a huge user base. They employ all these people. They're still buying companies and investing in different things. It makes it sound different than the actual truth in my mind anyway.
people will do that, boil it down to something that is 140 characters, and it's not necessarily the truth.
Headline.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the truth or the whole truth.
No, and that's not a unusual thing for the internet or the world at large today, but still deserves pointing out because you see those things and it creates a sense there's a problem where there's probably not really a problem, or at least not as big of a problem as they make it out to be.
So, Shad, what's your key takeaway for brands from the first 10 years of Twitter?
So my takeaway, just open your mind to every new social network and envision the potential there. Don't cut yourself off on something because you don't see how it's relevant or you think it's not going to last. At least give it that exploration and open your mind to what could this be? Let's say at its most ideal, what could this network become and how could we be on board with that from the beginning and grow with that? Here's the news flash. Social media is always going to be new and progressive and ahead of you. So you got to embrace the unknown there.
It leads nicely into my takeaway, which is this. Stop fighting social media. You won't win. You won't win, Shad. Not you specifically. I think you'll win. Our world is connected now in ways that it wasn't just a decade ago, right? I mean, it's obvious. Twitter may seem confusing, but so was programming a VCR or changing the time on those old digital alarm clocks, at least for older generations. It really boils down to figuring out how it fits into your strategy because it should. In addition to what you said earlier, which is find out how you can apply resources in your business to that because it does take time. So stop fighting, fit it into your strategy, and then also give it adequate resources so that it can work for you. #I'm out.
Nice. Good mic drop there. I'll tack on to the end there. One thing real quick, is the don't do Twitter, use Twitter. If you're going to get in there, actually use it. Take information away from it. Put good information out there. Have fun throwing out your tweets. Be funny. Use the medium for all it's worth. Don't treat it as like this thing you're forced to do. Find a way to get in there and be a part of that world. You think of all that has happened in the past decade since 2006, and it's crazy to put yourself back in that time, which doesn't seem that long ago. But then when you look at some of the technology and the web and changes, it seems like 100 years ago.
Yeah, when you look back 10 years and the things that didn't exist 10 years ago, sometimes you lose sight of the fact that so much has happened in such a short time frame.
Yeah, no doubt. Good thing to mention, Patrick. There's another anniversary. It's not just Twitter who's celebrating 10 years.
Yeah, we celebrate 10 years. Actually, in March was our 10-year anniversary at Monsters Unlimited.
Like I like to say, Twitter stole our thunder somehow.
But we're always living in their shadow. Those little birds.
Yeah. 10 years, though.
Yeah.
Kudos.
All right. Well, covered a lot today. That's it for today's episode. You can find anything online, including our current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. You can also discover, listen, subscribe to Speaking Human on both iTunes and SoundCloud.
So many great options there. You can also email us with your thoughts on Twitter. What do you love or hate about it? Where do you think it's headed in the future? Let us know. Just share, give us a little piece of your mind. Share it with us. Or ask us any questions or comments. Feedback@thinkmonsters.com. That's feedback@thinkmonsters.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.
This podcast is getting mocked mercilessly right now by tweets. So stupid. Okay. All right. This is going to be a tough show. Yeah. I'm going to start. Okay. This podcast is getting mocked. Oh, man. Okay. Get in it.
Doing that doesn't make it any easier, dude. Get in it.
All right, this is serious. This podcast is getting mocked mercilessly right now by tweets featuring the hashtag. Oh, man. All I gotta do is get through this and things will get better.
Get through this. If you could get through this, you can
Get through anything. This podcast is getting mocked mercilessly right now by tweets featuring the hashtag SpeakingPooMan. It's the dumbest line I've ever written in any of these. And that's saying something. Oh, man. Okay. All right. Holy shit.
All the outtakes are just going to be us laughing hysterically.
I know. Like the sound of people not being able to breathe.
What's wrong with those guys?
All right, here we go. This podcast is getting mocked mercilessly right now by tweets featuring the hashtag. I felt so good when I started, and then, All right. Maybe I need to go fast.
Like the Micro Machines guy?
Yeah, this podcast is getting mocked.